As you know, I'm a member of the ADF Party, the Alliance for Democracy and Freedom, and this is the leader, Dr.Teck Khong, being interviewed. Hope you enjoy it.
Well, good morning and thanks very much indeed for joining the channel. My name is Jim Ferguson and I have a very interesting guest with us here this morning, Dr.Teck Khong, who is the leader of the Alliance for Democracy and Freedom Party here in the United Kingdom. Good morning, Dr. Khong. It's a pleasure to have you on this channel. I've been looking forward to speaking with you for some time. How are you?
Good morning, Jim. Fine, thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, not at all. My pleasure. You've been making a lot of headway as a fairly new political party here in the UK. You've got a lot of attention. And I think that's really down to your policies, but also the fact that you're also very active within your own field. And I thought maybe just for the sake of our audience who are going to be interested in you and in the party, if you would be able to tell us a little bit about your background as a doctor, the specialised areas that you were into, and then maybe what sort of got you involved in politics, if that would be okay.
Yes, Jim, thank you very much. I'll keep it brief. I trained in Sheffield and proceeded to higher training in hospital medicine in Leeds, and then went on to do research in rheumatology in Glasgow. Promotional prospects being what they were in those days, I eventually, for various reasons, opted to enter general practice, and I found a practice in Leicester. It was a very interesting time because we were in a state of flux. The health service was undergoing a lot of changes. Politically, we were, I think, heading out of a bad period. My practice was basically a very poor practice. It was in one of the 10%. It was one of the 10% poorest wards in the country, and I eventually got to learn a lot about people's fears and anxieties, their expectations in life, and it was a privilege to look after them. I branched out later on because of my interest in legal matters. I took a law degree as well. I went into forensic medicine. And from there, I broadened my experience. And it was around about the back end of the 90s that one of my patients noticed I was getting quite upset about the way the health service was being run. And the Scottish lady, Mrs. Pullen, said to me, she said, look, the way to improve matters is not to continue doctoring people from behind your desk, but to get out there and try and change things for the better, both locally as well as nationally. My response to that was basically that, I trained as a doctor, I just want to perform my job. But it did eventually open my eyes to what I've been seeing around me all the time, and I listened to her avidly, what can be done. So I took her advice, I followed her introductions to politics, and because she was chairman of a Conservative group in Leicester, in the Leicestershire County Council, I was admitted a Conservative parliamentary candidate. Interesting developments after that. I was very keen on making changes, so I set up the Policy Forum for Health for Andrew Lansley. I convened a meeting in Leicester. It was, I think, 13 weeks into Mr. Lansley's appointment as Shadow Secretary of State for Health. And during that time, I presented all the policy workings I had, firstly as the GP representative on the PMA Working Party for Medical Chambers, and presented the pros and cons of where we were and how we can head forward to be inclusive in terms of delivering care to every section of our society. I took part in the general election, firstly in 2005. I failed to get in. And then came fast forward to the latter period of the referendum. As we headed towards the referendum, I made my position very clear. I thought our country should be leaving the EU instead of receiving all the regulations and dictates.
Okay. So what I want to know then, Teck, is, you've started a new political party. Tell me a little bit about the alliance, because it is in fact gaining a lot of ground, and indeed has been really making quite a lot of headway. But tell us what your thoughts were around starting the Alliance for Democracy, and what it is you hope to achieve with the party.
Just a minor correction, Jim. I didn't start the Alliance for Democracy and Freedom. It was a group of 4 people with Mike Hookham, Ernie Warrender, Keith Lonsdale, and Paul Goldring. Now, I was invited to join them very early on, so I was very honoured. Our vision is basically the Conservative and the Labour Party were no longer what they were supposed to be. As you say, Conservative Party were no longer the custodian of conservative values. Labour Party has long ceased representing the working class people. And it was particularly poignant for me because working in a poor district, to see that the poor people were struggling to achieve social mobility, achieve equity in health, and various matters. I thought I share the values of the Alliance for Democracy and Freedom. And our ambition is basically to return to common sense politics. And we have various ways of encouraging people to participate in politics, especially those people who have become disengaged, disenfranchised. If you look at the term, the name of the party, we're called Alliance, Democracy, Freedom. We embody those 3 very essential principles. Obviously, society is very broad. We have people who have high endeavors, people high achievers, and we have at the bottom end people who are either underprivileged or struggle to achieve their ambitions in life. So what we want to do is to bring together people of all sorts of thoughts, but singularly concerned about the freedom to achieve, freedom to take the country forward. Democracy, we want to do it by a very special means, and that is by, instead of setting up branches, we have what we call proud of groups. So if you're in Oldham, we have a proud of Oldham. If you're in Sheffield, we have a proud of Sheffield, and so on. We also have proud of occupational groups. So we have a proud of health and social care workers. We have proud of British farmers, proud of British fishermen. And these groups interact and weave policy to take the country forward. So one of the fundamental principles is if we have localized groups feeling proud of the community, we are starting to return the activism back to grassroots.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense, because I think there has been a severe disconnect between the so-called political elitists and their electorate, and people are really quite upset with the political class at the present time. And I know that there's good reason for that. We've seen so much corruption. We have seen people who are really self-serving. They're in it for themselves. They're clearly not in it for the people. And I think people are getting really quite concerned about that. May I ask you your own particular thoughts? Because, that there is some concern that there is interference, what I would class as foreign interference, with some of our members of Parliament on both sides of the House. And I'm going to come back to something you said earlier on about the Conservative Party and indeed Labour Party no longer being what they once were. But the World Economic Forum seems to be playing quite a large part in interfering with national governments, not just in the United Kingdom, but indeed around the world. And I just wondered if you had any thoughts about that.
Yes, Jim. It's there are so many pieces of evidence of interference. taking our situation back to the COVID pandemic, for example, I was alarmed at the narrative the government was putting out, and having done clinical research, I was extremely concerned that standard principles of ethics weren't followed. I mean, we have a product which is in phase 3 clinical trial without safety data for informed consent. We rush it off to mass rollout. We then put pressure on people to take the vaccine. We even reach a stage where, for example, Sajid Javid said, if you don't have the jab, you don't have your job as a healthcare worker. But it's not just in this country. If you look at other countries, there seems to be a synchrony going throughout the world. So, first of all, to answer your question, yes, there is ample evidence of interference, supranational interference in government ways of handling. Then we have the situation where even if the information wasn't available, the product was generally acceptable. When the information came in from reports, when doctors were starting to notice things, there was a very heavy censorship on what was allowed to be discussed. Now, there was a mantra, follow the science, but science cannot progress without discussion. And to close down the profession, to degrade the National Health Service by all these measures of restrictive access is putting people's health at risk. And we're not seeing this problem just here, we're seeing it elsewhere too. And for the government then to say, you should ignore these people who are false informers. They have these, what do you call them, fact checkers and so on. I think is beyond the pale, really.
I mean, I think a lot of people would be. I should really ask you the question, Dr. Khong, as well. Have you been to Davos? Have you met with Klaus Schwab? Are you a member of the World Economic Forum?
I'm none of those, Jim. None of those.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I know that a lot of members will be interested to hear that, especially in light of what we've been witnessing in France and the chaos that's going on there. There's a lot of people deeply concerned about what the World Economic Forum are doing. Can I go back then briefly to what you said about the Conservative Party and Labour, because this is quite an important point. And I think, I've made a prediction, Teck, that the Conservative Party are probably looking at a wipeout at the next general election, whenever that happens to be. And of course, we won't know that until near the time. But also, the Labour Party is completely different from what was started by my fellow Scot, Sir Keir Hardie in Glasgow, many years ago. It bears no resemblance to traditional Labour values, traditional Labour thoughts and feelings about looking after working people. And is really something that is just actually akin to what we have with this corporate globalist Conservative Party that is no longer Conservative either. Indeed, Sir Keir Starmer is a member of the World Economic Forum. He's been to Davos and he's declared his loyalty to Klaus Schwab. So I think that's an important point to make and to clarify. Just moving forward then ever so slightly, if we may, because, you're talking about with the people, by the people, and to serve the people. And I think that's a very, very powerful idea. Can you explain a little bit more about that, please, Doctor?
Yes. Well, the way the Alliance for Democracy and Freedom is set up is very straightforward. We don't have whips for our councillors or council candidates. We don't have whips in the majority of situations, apart from certain things which obviously need a cohesive national policy. So when I said we have proud of groups, imagine yourself, let's say, I think, all right? So
originally.
Proud of, yes, sorry?
Originally.
Originally, right, okay. If you're proud of and you want to advance the interests of the people. You want to become progressive, prosperous, and all the good things that society is meant to achieve together. You would say, look, let's set up a proud of. So you speak to friends and say, look, what do we need here? What can we do better? What do we need to get rid of that's hampering our progress? So that's the start of grassroots democracy. So what we're trying to do is to encourage people to take back control at a local level and then eventually build it up. So we have, for example, proud of British fishermen. What's holding our fishing industry? What's decimating it? Well, we have a Brexit that isn't Brexit at all. We have all these super tankers coming to scoop our fish. We have communities that have thrived for centuries on the fishing industries are being compromised by a lack of vision and lack of activity politically. So the proud of British fisheries would be looking at ways to lobby politicians and say, look, let's get Brexit done properly. Let's build our fishing industries back. Let's encourage apprenticeships in fishing, whatever it is. So when we have the proud of Hull, for example, and proud of British fisheries working together, we will start to see a development of people interested in politics. I've often met people who say, look, I'm not interested in politics, just as I was interested in medicine. But because I was hampered in delivering what I need to deliver to the people, I had to take an interest in politics because, after all, policies affect the way we live.
Yes, indeed.
So the proud of concept, I think, is a very powerful thing to return democracy to the people. And we like to see a better state of recall where if a candidate doesn't perform adequately or to the satisfaction of the people who voted him or her, then we have a recall.
Well, that's a really important point. I mean, how many times have we seen politicians doing things, getting caught, effectively taking money from special interest groups?
Yes.
It's a bribe by another name. And I absolutely agree, Teck, that is very, very important. I think you'll get a lot of support for that particular idea. Now, I mean, we have to keep an eye on the time. We've got a little bit of time left, but we need to keep an eye on it. I do want to get your opinion on some international matters that are going on. Obviously, we've been witnessing things in France. I'm not going to go into too much. I've spoken at length about that on the channel over the last few days, covering it almost on an hour-by-hour basis. But can we just touch on Ukraine for a moment? What is your thoughts on Ukraine? What would be the way forward, in your opinion, if you were, for example, to be in a position to give advice, or to, if you were elected at this point? I mean, what would you do that perhaps hasn't been done already?
I think we need to withdraw from the war. It's not our war. And we're giving a lot of taxpayers' money away, fighting a war that takes us, or rather sucking us into greater conflict. What I feel is very sad and upsetting is taxpayers' money, which could be used to regenerate health, regenerate our cities, is being siphoned away. As far as health is concerned, we need to look at it properly, because without health, you cannot generate wealth and there won't be any happiness. There's no saying health, wealth, and happiness. And I'm afraid, I need the whole talk on health, because there has been no politician since I left medical school capable of changing health, understanding health properly, and knowing what best to do for it. And I've given lectures on so-called tripartite compact, which is about how government taxes the people to pay the doctors to look after the people. What government has done is it has become far too big and using managerial methods to control doctors, to manipulate doctors by financial incentives. They have distracted the professional relationship between doctors and patients. And one of my single big tasks is to help reorganize our health system. It is beyond repair. It needs to be sorted out from ground up. I think before we talk about Ukraine, we need to address our own needs. And, we give so much money away. We have illegal immigrants running at, 6 £6 to £8 million a day in terms of accommodation.
Yeah.
When we have our own homeless people on the streets, well, let's get our priorities right. This country must look after its own people first. There's no
And
point talking about it. I want the people to help me do it.
Yeah, and that is exactly what national leaders should be doing. They should be looking out for their own people. The interests and the loyalty of those national leaders should be to the country. It should be to their people. Unfortunately, with WEF Administrator Sunak, his loyalty is to a German going by the name of Klaus Schwab
Yes.
in a completely other country. His loyalty is not to the people of the United Kingdom. His loyalty, and indeed now we know that Sir Keir Starmer's loyalty is now to him as well. And this is deeply concerning. We are going to have to change the political system in this country. And men and women like you, Dr. Khong, are making that a very real possibility. In the sort of closing 2 to 3 minutes, Dr. Khong, I'm going to give you the time to say whatever it is you want to say. The floor is yours.
Jim, thank you very much. I think what we need to instill in people and inspire confidence in people is this country is full of talent. This country needs to be led properly, and we have the wherewithal to achieve ascendancy again. We have the ability, we have the wealth within ourselves to create a better society, a more equitable way of life for everybody. There is plenty of opportunity for everyone. But first of all, I think we need to declare our patriotism to the country. We must all work together for the greater good of all. We have failed miserably. We have listened to foreign dictates that have no interest of British interests at heart.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think that's going to get you huge support, because that is the feeling of millions of people in this country. Doctor, I would love to have you back on the show. You talk a lot of sense. There's a lot of wisdom, I think, in you, and I'd be very grateful if you would consider coming back on the show, because there's so much to talk about, and I know that we've touched on some subjects that really deserve an awful lot more detailed analysis. Would you be willing to come back at some future point?
I would indeed, Jim. I'm afraid I haven't had a very coherent response to some of your questions, because we are being assailed from all angles, and there's so many different things to consider. But if we have dedicated time to talk about, say, health, foreign aid, immigration, I'd be more than happy to deal with those things specifically and in detail, which I hope to deliver with greater clarity.
Well, I think you're right, and I think I'd love to do that, and perhaps we could get you back on for a sort of a series of talks about those very key and specific issues, especially those things that are deeply worrying and concerning to so many people here in the United Kingdom. All right, well, Dr. Khong, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much indeed for coming on. I look forward to speaking with you again. And to all of the audience out there who have been tuning in, thank you indeed for your support. We're bringing some incredible content to people, not just here in the United Kingdom, but in the United States of America, in Europe, and indeed around the world. So my thanks to you for helping to spread and share these wonderful messages and inspiring talks. So thank you to you. And Dr. Khong, my sincere thanks to you. I wish you well. I look forward to seeing you again in the future.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you very
much.
Thank you. My name is Jim Ferguson, and we will speak soon. Thank you very much.
So there we go. I think you can probably guess now why I joined the party. A doctor who spoke up during the COVID scam. Every day we get more information that these big pharma companies knew what they were dishing out hadn't been properly tested, and every day we get more of a cover-up, because with excess deaths being so high, why? And even more importantly, why is no one asking why in the media? We've all got to wake up, haven't we? Hope you enjoyed it, and catch you soon.